You're with the Women's Forum. Women for Health is the big focus. What an enriching, critical conversation we have just heard. And there is so much more for us to go at the Women's Forum with many important issues that highlight the struggles, challenges of women as we try and make this world a more equal one. The spotlight next is on inclusion. And in one of our recent interviews, Indra Noe said to me, inclusion is a state of mind, and I couldn't agree more. We do need to have far more inclusive workforces. In fact, workforces that allow for opportunities to stay longer with women. How can women and their employers be supported in this transition? What can be the long-term piece? That is the focus on the next few discussions here. And in the spotlight is a special launch as a part of today's program at the Women's Forum. For all of this and much more, I'm going to hand over to Marie-Aline.
Thank you, Shelly Chopra. Hi, everyone. We are going to talk about inclusion, and we are going to focus on a huge company, a French group, because sometimes French do it better. It's not a joke, it's the truth. AXA, which decided to ask its employees if they felt included in their company. And it's an honor for me to introduce you to Karima Silvent. Welcome, Karima, Chief Human Resources Officer at AXA. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. For our viewers, you can ask any question you want during this discussion, and of course, we will answer. In September, Karima, your group decided to run a survey, confidential and voluntary, to ask AXA employees about their feeling of inclusion. This survey was sent to over 100,000 of your employees from Europe to Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Why did you decide to launch this survey?
Marie-Aline, thanks for inviting me to share our experience. And I think in many companies, we are all engaged and committed to progress on inclusion, but rarely do we ask directly to people if they feel, how they feel about the progress and what matters to them. And so as we have put inclusion, I would say, at the forefront of our business strategy, we thought that we needed to measure and to understand what people think. And so it took us 1 year to define the questions, because as we are present in 57 different geographies, fine-tuning the questions to take into account regulations, culture sensitivities was very important. And I'm very happy that after 1 year, we were able last September to launch this survey, and now to have the results and also the verbatims to be able to understand what people have in mind.
And which questions did you ask?
In fact, we spent time and we finally landed on 7 questions. And for me, it was very important that the questionnaire itself is very short and that people could spend, I would say, 10, 15 minutes answering to it. And basically, we split the questions into 3 categories. I would say the first category is around feeling. And I loved what Shali said about inclusion, because we all know it. For me, inclusion is first and foremost the feeling. Do you feel welcome in your environment? Do you feel you can be fully yourself in your environment? So we ask questions to people like, do you feel you belong? Do you feel you are included? And we gave a definition which was pretty broad around inclusion. The second category of questions was around experience. What is your experience of inclusion? Are you experiencing, did you experience non-inclusive behaviors? And here, when I'm talking about non-inclusive behaviors, I'm not talking about unacceptable behaviors that are to be reported through other channels, but the day-to-day language, jokes, behaviors that sometimes can hurt people, but also are extremely important to tackle in society, but also in the corporate environment. And we ask our employees to tell us if they would recommend AXA as an inclusive place to work. We ask the same question, many of us, to our customers: would you recommend this company as a great brand? We wanted to ask that question to our employees. And lastly, we had what we call a self-identification question. I think we all know that across the geographies, asking diversity questions. It's not the same when you're located in the US or in France. Some questions are not allowed in some geographies, so it took some time. And at the end, we have asked our people to self-identify. They could opt out, but I would say 97% of them decided to respond to the self-identification questions around 5 dimensions: their age, disability, gender, sexual orientation, and also origin. And I'm very happy that once again, 90-70% of them decided to respond to the self-identification question.
And what did you learn from those results?
I would say my first big learning, because when you launch that and when you have a 100,000 employee baseline, 57 geographies, the first question is, will people participate? You know, because and I would say my first learning is the interest of people to participate and to share their voice and their convictions. And we had 56% participation rate, 57,000 people across the world responded and left 16,000 verbatims to us. And for me, that's the first element, which is this matters. People want to participate, want to define the strategy of corporations around this topic. And so it's very important to give them the voice. My second learning is that we've been working 15 years or more on inclusion and diversity. There are areas where we are very strong. So the sentiment of being included and belonging is high, around 86%. But we see it's less for some populations of diverse origins, for disabled people. So it's still around 80%, but less than the average. So for us, we see clearly the gaps where we need to act more. And my third learning is around, I would say, what people feel as being the non-inclusive behaviors that hurt them on an everyday basis. Because through the verbatims, we see that. And I would say my takeaway is it's about everyone. Because people don't feel included when in team conversations, they are not. And we know it because on gender diversity, it's very true that sometimes women are not asked in the room to speak or to voice their opinion. So these elements around how to create an inclusive workplace and what hurts people on the way we manage the teams, the way we solicited them, sometimes careless comments around physical appearance, etc. We have all those comments. And for me, it's a learning also because we know exactly where we need to act.
You said that this survey was about age, gender, origins, LGBT+, disability, mental well-being. And this was a success because many employees decided to answer. That means that your employees needed to share about this issue. Do you know how did your managers react?
We started to share the results 3 to 4 weeks back. And I would say the first reaction was to say, at last, we have now data and insights. Because, you know, I think we all have data on gender diversity. We have a lot of data and insights sometimes in our companies. But on inclusion more broadly, we didn't have data and insights. So I think the first reaction of managers was relief to have at last data and insights and verbatims. The second was, where are the gaps? What do we need to do and to act? And so for me, it's a really healthy reaction to go deep now and to look at the gaps and to see where we need to improve. But really, I think now we have all what we need, because once again, progress is about measuring and data. I do really believe in data and measuring. And once you have that, you know where to go and where to focus on.
You said where you need to improve. I think it's the key to this issue. And you said it, the answers won't be the same in Asia or in Africa or in Europe. So how can each entity of AXA from all over the world learn from it?
I think the advantage of a big corporation is exactly that one. It's learn from, for example, the age and the multi-generation workforce, the age dimension comes bigger in some geographies like Europe, where our average age is 48 years old. It comes bigger rather than gender or disability. Of course, origins, the topic around origins and how we recruit, how we promote people of diverse origins will come stronger in some geographies than others. And so the solutions that we'll be building in some geographies, it's very interesting to see how they can replicate in other countries. And that's why I think it's very interesting, in a sense, to have this laboratory across geographies and to be able to test what works. I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all, because we know that the way people and societies perceive this topic can change from one geography to another, but it's definitely a strength to be able to copy-paste sometimes some programs, to show how it works, to show that it's not true that you can't progress, for example, on gender in some geographies. No, it's not true, because we see truly that you can have the same social ingredients and be able to progress. So putting things in context and with the relativity of comparison helps, I think, to progress across countries.
Very last question about this issue. It's a yes or no questions. Do you think that other companies should do the same in another way, maybe, but dealing seriously with this issue?
I think definitely yes. I think each company is different and can have his own way of doing. But I do believe, once again, that to push for progress, you need to measure and to define where you want to go. So measurement and data is very important, and asking direct feedback from the people. So definitely I would encourage, and I've learned a lot from some companies who did it already. So more to come, I believe, in this front.
Thank you very much, Karima Silvent. You stay with us because I'm going to open a new debate, ladies and gentlemen. The title will remind you a famous movie, No Country for Old Women, Gendered Access to Better Aging. You know, for many women in business between 45 and 55, this age means dealing with a lot of issues. The menopause transition, which can last for up to 8 years, often a management role, and taking care of their families, children, and parents. As a result of all those challenges, women often neglect themselves. Sometimes many of them drop out of the workforce and dedicate their lives to roles they haven't chosen. So the question is, how can businesses and governments adopt policies to better support women at midlife? To help us answering this big question, 4 amazing women, obviously, and it's an honor to moderate this debate with Tanuj Kapilashramee, welcome, Group Head of Human Resources at Standard Chartered Bank. Karima Silvent, of course, welcome, Chief Human Resources Officer at AXA. Valérie Perruchot-Garcia, welcome, Communication and Public Affairs Director at Jensen. And Elizabeth Jeffords, welcome, CEO of Okiyi Therapeutics. Thank you for being here with us, and the audience can ask any questions and we will try to answer them during this debate. First of all, how would you define midlife, menopause transition? Is it just a question of age, of metabolism? Who wants to start? Maybe Tanuj.
Thank you very much. First, let me just say, delighted to be part of this conversation. And there is sort of published data around sort of the 45 to 55 years, which are typically the years that women go through menopause. I think the reason I've had the invite is because in Standard Chartered Bank, early this year, we did a survey jointly with Financial Skills Commission in UK, across all financial services company, exploring menopause transition and the impact it has on women's well-being, their sense of inclusion, and their career progression. And actually what the results told us, that actually the symptoms for a lot of women start much earlier than 45. And that's why this debate starts becoming interesting and actually quite complex. So, you know, in the survey, we had many respondents who shared stories, but both sort of filling the survey, but their qualitative stories of women starting to experience symptoms of menopause as early as their late 30s, and actually the sense of confusion and the lack of information that goes with it, just because the level of awareness is so poor. So the scientific age is, of course, the sort of 45 to sort of 55, but our research showed that there were women who experienced it as early as in their 30s.
Yeah, and it's important to highlight the fact that your company, Tanuj, run a survey about menopause transition, and I will go back to you on this survey. But Karima, Silvent, you want to share about your vision about menopause transition?
I would say I tend to define it broadly and say it's a period of opportunities and challenges at the same time. Because I do believe there are opportunities. That's the period where we see in organizations that women, as Tanuj said, are, they are thriving, because that's where they are landing in leadership roles. That's the moment where they get most promoted. If you look at all the excom of big corporations, let's be honest, you will find women of that age group. So that's a period of opportunities, because they take the full breadth of their potential and the experience they have acquired in the past 10 years. It's a period of challenges, and we see it as an insurer, because that's the period where women face transitions, because they have their kids sometimes who are growing up and are close to leave home. They have their parents and they need to care for their parents. And we came at AXA to look closely to caregiving, for example. And what we see in caregiving is that these are the women who are caregivers. 58% of caregivers are women, and the typical profile of a caregiver is a woman of 59 years old who will spend 20 hours a week caring for elderly parents. So it's a period of opportunities and challenges, and the question is, how do we support it? Because I do agree that there needs to be more support in that period for institutions and corporations, and on caregiving especially. There are many institutions who give more support, and especially on mental health, on mental load, because this is a huge societal issue, and we've been doing that with having dedicated products and services for those women in that age group and facing this caregiving activity.
Yeah, and Karima, you will tell us later how your company can better support women who face menopause transition. Elizabeth.
Yes, Marie-Aline, can I challenge us a little bit, though, to say that menopause is not the end, right? Menopause really is midlife. And as we live now into our 80s, and then soon it's going to be 90s and 100s. And by the way, at age 85 on the Earth, it's about, I think by 2050, it'll be 5 or 6% in developed countries will be over 85. And 2/3 of those people will be women, right? So we really have to think about women's aging as well. And menopause, scientifically, the women's bodies start changing at age 30. I hate to tell you. We may experience the majority of the symptoms like right now for me, but for in terms of science and the impact on your body, the changes to your cardiovascular system, your endocrine system, your neurological system, you name it, it's all connected. That starts at 30, and it sort of changes over time like this. So we really need to think societally, as companies, as governments, as policymakers, we need to be thinking about what comes even after menopause, because after we stop having the function to make children, of course, we don't become invisible, right? We do keep working for maybe 15, 20 more years. And then after that, we still have a good 30 or 40 more years of life. And any gender inequalities that we have, that we've built up during the maternal years and during the menopause years, they just compound and compound and compound. And that ends up being a situation where most women have much less resources when they're in their later set of life, even where you have a situation where women have pensions and government securities and that sort of thing. Even in those cases, women do have much less financial well-being in those later stages of life, and frankly, much higher financial cost and burden.
Elizabeth, why is it so complicated to talk about menopause transition? Why is it taboo?
You know, it's such a strange thing. Why do we not talk about vaginas and ovaries and everything else? They're just an organ like anything else. Although I would, we don't talk about penises much either, but it is a strange thing. And why do we not talk about it at work particularly? I was thinking about one particular situation, when I was pregnant and I had to give a big presentation. When you're full bellied, right, it presses up on your lungs and it's hard to breathe. So I had to give a big presentation and I was just trying to breathe. And of course, everybody knew it was because I was pregnant. But then later, a couple of years ago, I was rushing to a fundraising. I was going to a venture capitalist, and I was trying to raise some money for my company. And I was rushing, and I just started into an absolute sweat, right? And so I got there, and my face just flushes bright red, so you can tell every little bit of the stress on my face. And then I'm absolutely just sweating like crazy. So I flapped before I went in, but I was still so hot. And I was faced with do I take my jacket off with my bare arms, or do I leave my jacket on and just sweat during basically a moment where I need to say, as Karima said, I'm in my full power. I am in my moment of my most capable self. And how do I explain that? Do I explain to this venture capitalist I'm in the middle of a hot flash? No, right? I just tried to sort of gloss over it. And why do we do that? I don't know.
Yeah, we should be able to talk about it. And Elizabeth, I think we talk more about penis than vagina. I think. Valérie, how would you define menopause transition?
Well, I think it comes with a lot of other transitions when you grow older, and it's a very interesting age for women, but there is an astonishing silence when it comes to the role these old women, I quote because of the title of the session, are playing in society, particularly this caregiving role that we were mentioning, Karima. We have to know that by 2030, it will represent 25% of the French society. So we will be all concerned by that. We will all have a role to play. And I hope that people will play the role for us afterwards. And this astonishing silence need to be managed. I mean, we need to recognize, to acknowledge this role that caregivers are playing for the health of society at large, because it's not really rewarded today. It's not really considered. And if we want to address something to policymakers or healthcare authorities today, this role has to be really put in the light, and we can really work on that and make recommendations together to improve the situation. Because despite this very interesting moment, phase of life for women, you've climbed the ladder of the corporate world, you have success, you have leadership roles, you have more responsibilities, and all of a sudden you face these new issues, and you were not trained for that. You don't know what's happening in your life. You have to cope with very complex situations, to take care of your parents, of your child, of your spouse, whoever, or even neighbors. As you were saying, 40% of caregivers take care of 2 people or more today. So that's a lot, and 20% spend more than those 20 hours you mentioned. So that's a real burden. So we should really consider it differently and make the look of society at large change on this role, because it's going to grow, because you mentioned these demographic issues that we are facing. We are the society will be older, we will live longer. Thanks God, I work for a healthcare company that's contributing to that greatly. But the problem will grow also with the aging of the population. So I think, yeah, we have to change the look. We have to really take it seriously. We have to find solutions, and it starts with us as big international companies. We can change that. We can train people. We can change the way the management can consider when they have to face the issue in a team, what kind of support can we bring, etc. So all these topics, but maybe will come in the second part of this discussion on the solutions.
And Tanuj, your company, you said, have performed research on menopause transition across different financial institutions. Can you tell us more about this research, and what did you learn from this?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the first thing I will say is, why did we do it? And it goes to how Karima started off this conversation around inclusion. So, the purpose of Standard Chartered as a bank, we are 100,000 employees in 60 markets, and our purpose is driving commerce and prosperity with a very strong sense of inclusion where everyone has a chance to succeed. And that's really sort of inherent to us as an organization. We were quite intrigued by having conversations with senior women who were taking decisions either to step away from full-time employment or passing on promotion, etc. And we did our own research, and we found that at this point in time in UK, there are potentially 130,000 women who are going through menopause in financial services alone. And if you then mirror it, or if you then add on to the challenge that Karima mentioned, in financial services in UK, we have less than 1/3 senior roles by women, occupied by women. Menopause transition is at the time where women are making the big opportunity, the big leap to sort of C-suite jobs or very senior jobs. And the amount of taboo that exists around this topic, we felt that we needed more information. So we partnered with Financial Skills Commission and did a survey across all FS firms. So we had 2,500 respondents across 100 financial services firms in UK, where we asked a lot of information around impact of menopause transition on people's careers, what would it take to get further support from their organizations, etc., etc. Some things came out which were fascinating. So almost half of women currently experiencing the menopause said that they were less likely to apply for promotion because of their experiences with the menopause. Over half of them, so 52%, said that they were less likely to take on extra responsibilities. The statistic which was staggering to me was almost a quarter of respondents said that they were seriously considering leaving the workforce completely, either retiring early or making a career transition completely out of financial services because of their experience with the menopause. And so look, I mean, it is a serious issue. It is absolutely a serious issue. And when we started probing into what would, the fabulous question you asked, Elizabeth, and I've thought about it quite often, why is it that as women, we find it uncomfortable to talk about this openly? And there were a couple of things came out in the survey. One was the discourse around menopause needs to change. There is such a strong silence around this topic, because of which this topic is hidden. And a lot of people said that even if we can start off by opening the conversation around this topic in companies, even before you get to benefits and medical, even just opening conversation, removing the taboo around this topic, and where women felt that they would feel greater support. If they could just talk about this topic more openly, it would have a very positive impact in their decision to continue with their employment. So, it validated for me what I had implicitly known. But actually, if you start looking at the data and the statistics, it further confirmed to us the need that this is something that we need to act upon quite seriously.
Yes, the question is, how can we fix this? And we have a question from the audience. How can we have healthy aging relevant for both those who manage senior women and for employees or teams who want to support their managers through this life stage?
I mean, I'll go very quickly, but then I would love to hear from other panel members. Clearly, we don't have all the answers. This is something that we are grappling with. I mean, what was really fascinating for me in the survey is, one, we had men responding, and not as many as I would like, but there were enough male respondents. We also had few trans men responding, which was quite interesting. And it's in the verbatim comments, a lot of men said, we would like greater education and awareness, both to be able to support women in our personal lives, our partners, our family members, but equally as leaders, we would like greater information and awareness to be able to support our colleagues at work. So for me, what was really encouraging is the number of men who came forward, both in the survey, but as we announced the survey and the findings inside our own organization, the number of male colleagues who said we want to be further educated. So coming back to actions, we think they are in two buckets: education, awareness. Creating an open space for these conversations to happen is a big step forward. We fundamentally believe that just by removing the taboo around this topic, we can make huge progress, and that's for both men and women. And the second set of actions is around workplace adjustments. The infrastructural support that could be given, flexible working, providing cold rooms, for frontline staff, in branches, spare uniforms. So there are infrastructural things that can be done to provide greater support. But to me, the biggest opportunity is education, awareness, and just opening up the topic inside the conversation so that both men and women can participate in conversations.
Maybe Karima, Silvent, or maybe Elizabeth.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think there's two things that the pandemic has brought us as gifts, and one of them has a bit of a thorn to it in the gift. The first is an understanding that we should ask anyone we work with, whether they work for us or we work for them, what can I do to meet you where you are? What do you need, right? And I think we did that very well during the first year. It's slipping off a little bit now, but we did very well in the first year, right? Where do you need to be? What time do you need? When do you need to work? What support do you need, etc. Even in the US, and I believe this is true a lot in Europe, there was a fair amount of sort of not just the health impacts, but the sort of racial reckoning that we were going through. We had to just ask people, what support do you need? How do you want me to be there for you as your colleague, right? And that opened up a whole new line of personal inquiry and gave us a chance to open a dialogue that I think wasn't there before. I think the second one is this workplace flexibility, and that we've allowed people now to work from home and maybe have more flexible hours, or to work in different ways. That has certainly helped me be there for my teenage children or my mother, etc. But there's a sort of a watch out, I think, with that, is that if we allow people, and I think there was a Forbes article on this and a New York Times article on this just in the past week, if we allow people to opt into flexibility, is it going to be mostly women because they are mostly the caregivers? And if so, is that the new mommy track, is what they called it, right? Are they going to be sidelined a bit by taking that flexibility? Are they going to be included, right? I don't know how many times in my career I've heard, you should really just go out for beers with the guys, right? Yeah. On Zoom, I can't go out for beers with the guys. So am I going to be able to be included and have the same moments for those promotions and things like that over the course of my career? So I think that flexibility is wonderful, but I think it comes with some sticky issues that we have to reconcile.
Agree. Yes, what I can add is maybe maybe 2 to 3 dimensions. The first one is health, because I think still women's health is an issue, and the pandemics didn't improve things. And this is also something that I would like to highlight, because what we have observed, and we are a health insurer, is that, and we have surveyed this past month, we have surveyed 8,000 customers across multiple geographies. And what we see, we already had a trend, which is that women were caring less for their health than men. And women of that age group were caring less for their personal health than men. And what we see through statistics is that this has worsened, and that women go less to see doctors, to go less to see, to do their medical checkup, etc. So I think my first thing on what we can do as institutions and corporates is focus even more on women's health. Because in some geographies, once again, there are in Europe and in some geographies in the Americas, it's access to health may be easy, but in others, it's very difficult. So today we are going through a period of time where women's health is deteriorating, and maybe specifically for that age group. And what struck me also is that the women of that age group, when they go to see doctors, what they report is that their pain is not taken into account as much as they would report it to. I don't know if you saw that type of data. So I think the first thing is, what can we do to support women in their health? I think companies can act and can do things. We've tried to implement some support services, and we've launched a policy, global policy on health, also because we thought that the pandemic had, I would say, reduced the services that people were using on health. My second comment will be on stereotypes, because I think Tanu, you said it, Elizabeth, you said it. What we see in societies are a lot of stereotypes around aging women. And I think that through various channels in companies, but also in movies, in the institutions, in whatever, the image of men aging is the image of being wise, being, whatever attributes you would put on men when aging. The image of women aging is not the same. And very often when you look to corporate brochures or whatever, you will represent women being more on their 40s than on their 55 plus. So I think, or 60. And I very much agree with you, Elizabeth. The good news is that we will all live longer. And so we'll have to reinvent careers. And so I think there is a huge need to change and to tackle the stereotypes. And here again, every one of us has a role to play, because we can show more of these women who are, successful at 55, 60, building businesses at 65, whatever. But I think this is really a topic that we need to tackle even more. And on education, I couldn't agree more, Tanuj. I think that we educating, informing on what's behind, what are the health dimensions of it, but also the psychological dimension, the life dimension of this is helpful for everyone in the workplace, not only for women, because the question was also how can you help teams understand, etc. So I think investing in education is something that everyone can do, and that at the end will help societies and corporates to be more inclusive and more aware of what's needed. And this will help retain people in the workplace, because you will have more and more people being educated and knowing what the others are going through. And my last word will be about the cult of performance, because in our organization, we have the cult of performance, and sometimes it's difficult for men and women to acknowledge that I'm not on the top of my game. I love what you said around your jacket and entering in a meeting. But what I observe is that it's true that for men and women, especially with higher responsibilities, it's difficult to acknowledge that today I'm not on the top of my game for whatever reason. And I think the culture that we need to instill, this is still a challenge, is that it's okay not to be okay. Sometimes I'm super on the top of, and sometimes I'm not, for various reasons. I may not have to explain why, But I think this needs to be fully acceptable in society and by companies.
Ladies, we have several questions from our audience, and this last one is very good. I think you will like the question. How can we start awareness and education about the menopause transition in emerging economies, which are still grappling with employee support for maternal health? Very good question. Who wants to answer?
I can go very quickly first because, given our footprint, this has been a topic that's been very, very relevant for us. So we are a British headquartered bank, but almost our entire workforce sits in emerging markets, Africa, India, Asia, Middle East. And in many of these markets, the debate around women's health is actually a few years behind what it is in the Western Hemisphere. So this idea of how do we jumpstart the conversation and how do we, not wait to follow the tide, but actually lead on some of these conversations has been really top of our mind as we've been having these conversations. We did some very simple things. And, again, we pulled together a very simple menopause guide for people leaders to have conversations with their team. And what we found was awkwardness. A lot of leaders, both men and women, want to have these conversations. We had the same debate when at the back of Black Lives Matter, a lot of people wanted to talk about race, but they felt quite awkward doing it. People don't want to offend people. People don't want to cross the line. And what we did was pull together a very, very simple toolkit, menopause guide, and we sent it to all our people leaders, which had basic facts. This is what it is. Perimenopause, menopause. What does this mean? What are some of the common symptoms? And we then encouraged a lot of our senior women, coming to the point, Elizabeth, and I loved it because a lot of senior women, as we opened the debate, they said, look, we are very happy to share our stories. So actually what we started doing starting from our management board, but getting down to team meetings, etc., encouraging our people leaders to have these conversations and getting some proper stories into the room. And as we started getting those stories into the room, it just created a culture where people could just ask basic questions, right? I'm going to ask you a very silly question, but when this happens, how do you want me to sort of deal with it? Would you like to lead on the conversation, or can I ask the question? One of the people leaders in a call that I attended, they said, can I just ask a question to you, Tanuj, or Elizabeth, or Valerie, or Karima, or would you be offended if I asked you? So we just created the safe space at the back of this guide and getting women to talk about it, to start having some of those conversations. And we felt that in the emerging markets, because the education curve was perhaps a bit behind, it really helped. The two other things we did was our employee assistance program. Most companies have an employee assistance program. We provided additional support around menopause. So we sort of dialed up technical support and got counselors who were equipped on this topic. And in our well-being council, especially around mental health, we've got an app called Unmind, which focuses on sort of mental health, psychological sort of safety. We actually had a special track on this topic for people to get plugged into in a non-threatening way. So just making it accessible, easy, not very scientific, very conversational. We felt we were able to increase the reach.
After listening to you, I realized that our governments have to rethink their health policies. Of the 3M, menstruation, maternity, and menopause, only maternity is covered. So we have to change that. Elizabeth, you think it goes beyond the 3M. Why?
I think it's so important because of that aging, right? If you get to menopause, you've tackled probably maybe not even 55, 60% of a woman's life. So if we don't go beyond that, it's a great place to start, mind you, but it's not the whole That's not the whole thing. We have done so well on working on all of the what I call the midlife killers, and Valerie can probably talk about this. And I also think like Valerie can probably talk about one of the best things we can do for emerging countries is develop more medicines that we can get out there cheaply. But what we haven't done is we haven't fixed any of the sort of horrible end of life killers that are sort of neurologically and quality of life painful, that just lasts and lasts and lasts and lasts. Things like Alzheimer's, things like Parkinson's, the mortality from those diseases is going up by 40 or 50 or 80% over the last 15 years because we have people living longer and we have people not dying as much from cancer or from cardiac disease, et cetera. So we have to do something to actually invest in those areas. And it's one of the things that just makes me so mad. We have more drugs in development for pancreatic cancer than we do for Alzheimer's. How can that be? I think it's something like 1/400th of the population. Is that the right investment model? I don't know. And let alone menopause, where we just only have sort of boring old hormones to tackle the problem. I think if we had more women on the power seat in the investment houses, I think that would do a lot. And I think if we had more women in government positions of power, I think that would also do a lot to get, whether it's public money or private money, I think we've got to get the money out there to be making solutions for these diseases. Because, yeah, it's great that we're not all dying at 40 and 50, but if we die instead at 80, and it took us 10, 20 years to get there, and it wiped out all of our savings, and it made it so that our younger daughters had to take care of us and really destroy their careers to do it, that's not a great answer.
I agree. We need female leaders. Valerie,
coming back on something which was said, but there is a very important bridge to maintain between the generations. And when you talk about the 3 M's, I think the role that more senior women can play with younger ones who are having their first child or and going through this maternity transition is very important. So I think we need really to make sure that we don't create silos where we will lock older women there and not, playing with the other generations. So I think it's important, this role of transmission, that we can maybe enhance a little more in the professional workspace for sure. And it's also an important role that we can also rely on when it comes to this emerging country question, because the role women play in the community locally is really important to counterbalance the fragility of infrastructure, medical infrastructure, I mean, in different countries that we are also where we are also present. So I think it's important to consider that and to look at this role of transmission. We have a very interesting new program coming up, which was offered by a young mother who wants to make sure that we go through this maternity transition differently in Janssen, France. So it's going to be a pilot program, and I'm sure that we can really articulate that with more senior people who have gone through that, and we can also share their experience. Interestingly, so that's another thing, and I'm sure we are also always facing the same difficult question, which is how can we better play this ally role that men can play for us? Because I mean, we were talking about those taboos. So how do we discuss about menstruation or maternity or problems with menopause with our male colleagues? I think it's still a little bit difficult. I wouldn't say it's taboo, because I mean, depending on the level of confidence, you can talk about almost anything, but. But I think it's really what kind of role, what kind of better conversation we could have, and reassuring them that we also know that they are going through things like that. There is an andropause for men. There are also transitions for them in their lives. They can also have to care for people around them. So it's not so different. We are more numerous to contribute. We have the burden heavily on our shoulders. But they are not doing nothing. So I think we have to play something with them and act with them and consider them as allies in these difficult questions that we face.
And have things changed since the pandemic? Women don't want to put with all those burdens anymore?
I think on my side, I think the pandemic has opened conversations differently, you know, because I think that the pandemic brought, and we were talking about hybrid working previously, but I think the fact that we are all locked down for a period of time, working from home, men and women, I think it created other conversations in the workplace, but also in households. And I think it changed something. Some of the things that changed are not that positive, as I mentioned, on health. Some are positive in the sense of considering, the other, how the other is living, how because, suddenly we were all, entering in our private, private kitchens or whatever. So I think this is an opportunity to be, and I observe it in terms of leadership in companies, or at least in my companies, empathy has grown. People connect even more, people talk and share even more. So I do believe that the pandemic has brought that opportunity to be less formal, less, and then to organize this conversation. And health has become a topic we talk much more. I think during the pandemic, managers were reaching out to their colleagues or peers and say, so I think the how are you question has come much more prevalent today. And for me, it would be a pity to close the window after that. And I think we need to use and to leverage that so that there is even more openness, empathy, proximity in the future, because we see it clearly with the conversation. You put yourself in the shoes of the other, and then you improve how things are in the workplace. So I do believe it's a chance that the pandemic brought something different in the conversation.
I think it's already over. It went too fast. We had other questions. It was very, very interesting. Thank you for your advice. Thank you for your energy. And back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Aline.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie-Aline.